Howdy, everyone. It's an AFC South show, so I had to start off with that intro over here. I'm excited for this. We're going to get into a lot with this division. Corstian, how are you doing first off?
I'm doing pretty good. Uh, just finished setting up our little viewing thing to see all of the free agency moves for all these teams. So it's kind of fun to look at all the changes that happened over the course of this offseason for all the teams. But overall, yeah, just been chilling. Got off work a little bit early today, so it's been nice.
A little Friday fun day on a non-Friday in
Yeah.
anticipation for your 4th of July. Think it should be pretty hyped, pretty happy to be back home, chilling with the family. Like all of us are here, at least for a couple days until my brother moves. But yeah, it's gonna be exciting. First on our docket list, everybody's favorite team from last year, the Houston Texans, are
hmm
first up. And long story short, they're already a Super Bowl contender. This team, like, they've done everything right since landing CJ Stroud. And even like front office, Nick Casary's done a phenomenal job. D'Amico Ryan's done a phenomenal job as a coach, getting the most out of his players. This is a team where if they end up with a number one seed in the AFC, I won't blink at all because their schedule is very favorable. Um, they don't really have many challenges in their schedule until they hit the bye week, pretty much. If you're looking at collection of opponents that are nasty, and
hmm
even on the back half, they have Miami in December, which is nice. Then they're at home for that. Not that it matters, but because of their stadium. But like, I'm all in on this team. Like, if you want to bet on a dark horse for the Super Bowl, even though I'm not sure they're a dark horse anymore, this team might be it because
hmm
top to bottom, their roster looks nasty. What do you think
hmm
of the Houston Texans?
Yeah. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with for sure this season. During the course of the offseason, they did lose a few like key players, but then you look at like the free agency moves and just all their additions that they kind of had over the this plus the draft for depth and then all their second year players. Like it doesn't seem like they really lost anybody just because they were able to so easily refill those gaps with new players that are, proven already.
Yeah, my ceiling for this team, 14, 15 wins,
hmm
100%. They're like because they're the most complete. I feel like they're one of the most complete teams in the NFL. My floor will probably be 12 wins.
hmm
Now that's two more than where they finished up last season. Um, but I think this is one of the few teams where you can think of having a linear trajectory because of all the offseason moves they made. What says you? Do you agree with that, or do you have something else?
Yeah, yeah, more or less agree with that. Yeah, like I say that like it's I feel pretty confident saying that they'll have like a 10 plus win season this year. Because it's like just everything that they did feels like an upgrade to what they had last season, and the pieces that they lost were like immediately, put back into like with other players and whatnot. And so, yeah, I definitely can see a 12 to like 14, 15 win season for this Texans team.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, CJ Stroud gets hurt. That changes a lot
hmm
of things. Um, he's like highly regarded as one of the best NFL quarterbacks already. And if he gets hurt, then it's like, okay, yeah, if they don't make the playoffs, oh, big surprise. But their backups are Case Keenum and Davis Mills, who
hmm
who had some pretty like good stretches at quarterback play.
hmm
Like I'm not trying to say Davis Mills was a top 10 quarterback, but I'm saying he was like serviceable. He was like
hmm
a Case Keenum level quarterback. So like they have options where they can have a point guard at quarterback at the worst case scenario, and maybe we're looking at 9 wins,
hmm
8 wins. Like if CJ Stroud gets hurt and he's the only major loss they have. But other than that, provided everybody stays healthy, you have to chalk them up for double digits at least, obviously, but
hmm
towards the high end of the AFC conference. So Yeah, moving on to free agency. There were a lot of moves they made. What were some ones that stood out to you?
Um, I'd say obviously there was like the offense, like the trades, I guess, but like in terms of just like a move, like a just a free agency signing, uh, I don't know. I feel like I think it was the signing. Jeff Okuda was kind of just like a under the radar kind of bit. He's like on the depth chart here that we got. He is listed as kind of like the number 2 cornerback, and obviously in Detroit he's dealt with his injury issues. Atlanta, he's like I don't know. He didn't really make too big of splash plays, I guess, but now he gets a chance to play here, and it seems like he's starting to get to that area of being proven enough to get more of like a starting role, and he doesn't necessarily need to be a focal point of that too, because you got Derek Stingley on the other side, which I thought was just kind of like a small move that I think could pay dividends for this defense.
Yeah, and I think on along that defense too, we can't forget about the other corner they got, CJ Henderson.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do not forget, just because he was in Carolina doesn't mean he sucked as a player. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think we forgot about him as much as like we don't really pay attention to guys like Frankie Louvu at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like he's another guy, change of scenery on a winning organization. I think it's gonna pay dividends for that team. But I can't help but like not ignore the Danielle Hunter signing. I remember when
Mm-hmm.
it first came out, we were shocked by it, and
Mm-hmm.
it was like, oh, they lost Grenard, they had to keep him because he had such a
Mm-hmm.
strong performance. But no, it's like, oh, they were just waiting to get a casual Danielle Hunter 12 sack season type of guy
Mm-hmm.
consistently, and it's like, wow, that kind of took it over the top because now you got like bookend DNs, and it allows you to get solid guys like Donico Autry, like solid disciplined players to really round out this roster. So like if Will Anderson or Daniel Hunter gets stifled, you can count on a Donico Autry to like um beat a guard one on one. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's that type of player. And then I think Al Shair, and I believe he was on the Titans before that, and like with San Francisco, so he's familiar with D'Amico Ryan's scheme. That is an under the radar linebacker signing. I really like the player personally. So
Mm-hmm.
they did a lot of good things on like the defensive end to really
Mm-hmm.
make it more powerful and make the roster more well rounded. So I
Mm-hmm.
appreciated that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, lots of great. Like you can't forget about the Stephon Diggs and Joe Mixon
Uh-huh.
signings. I think it kind of they needed to make that as well. With the running back room, it was kind of a weird year for that room last year. Like you still got Damian Pierce, and he's kind of expected to be the starting back, and then all of a sudden Devin Singletary like explodes out the gate. I think this could be a two-headed monster, but like Joe Mixon could still put up Joe Mixon numbers.
Mm-hmm.
He's been a very efficient player, and then like Stephon Diggs is an interesting one because it's like from like some of the fantasy drafts I've just like been observing and participating in, he's not being regarded as a number one wide receiver on this team, which is weird because normally you think of Stephon Diggs from his time in Baltimore as being the number one wide receiver. A lot of people think it'll be Nico Collins,
Mm-hmm.
but even if that's the case, who cares? Who cares if you have a trio of like Nico Collins, Tank Dell, who exploded on the both exploded on the scene last year, and then you add Stephon Diggs to that? Like, I don't really think this is like a number one, number two, number three type like hierarchy here. I really think it's like any one of these guys could pop off for 100 yards, 2 touchdowns on a given Sunday. And the offense as a whole is going to be good. So they're going to get lots of fantasy points themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think from a matchup problem, like from football perspective, this is one of the most insane wide receiver cores I've seen. Like we were talking about it like before we started. Top seven on the team is like wow, I wish I had the wide receiving core like this well rounded and at the top elite. This is insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I didn't think the Texans were gonna make a move for a wide receiver just with how well they played last season, and I feel like a lot of people were of this mindset, and it was like, oh, if you're gonna add a receiver, like it's just kind of like an added bonus, and then that's what they did, and everybody lost their mind when all the news broke out that Stephon Diggs is gonna be with the Texans.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy signing, and it's like now it's like you can't single out like any guy to key on. And then like Dalton Schultz, like you still like kicking it. They managed to re-sign him. Offensive line is starting to get a lot better. Still, Larry Tunsil still being an elite player. It's a lot to like from what the Houston Texans are doing. From the draft side, what picks did you like as you're looking at their picks?
Um, this is like an interesting draft for them just because, like, it's hard to see who's going to make an immediate impact. But one guy I liked Kalen Bullock. He's like the safety that they drafted in the third round. Again, he's likely not going to start because he's behind Jimmy Ward and Jalen Petrie, both which I'm a pretty big fan of. But um, I think if like amongst the starters, I feel like if the one like the starter ahead of this said rookie gets hurt, I feel like most comfortable with Kalen Bullock coming in and kind of filling that role. And then I also liked Cade Stover, but he's a bit more buried down the depth chart. It makes sense with tight ends especially, but those are kind of just two of the draft picks that I was a pretty big fan of.
Yeah, I was about to say Stover as well. I think it was notable that CJ Stroud wanted Stover on the team.
Hmm.
I think he sees some like untapped like potential or talent that he knows how to maximize given his time at Ohio State. I really like that move because now they're not like heavily reliant on like Schultz being that tight end and guy that can stay healthy for full
Hmm.
season because that's unrealistic for anybody, like as far as roster building wise. And then Brevin Jordan's about to be a free agent, so I think this is kind of like saying,
Hmm.
Brevin, you better shape it up. You have all this potential. We used a high day one or day two pick. I think we used a day two pick on Brevin Jordan if I remember correctly. And he has all the athletic traits to be a really good tight end, but he just hasn't panned out yet.
Hmm.
Kate Stover is one of those guys who might be somebody we're talking about next year is like a top 10 tight end, like in fantasy to draft. This has turned into a fantasy show. like,
Hmm.
looking at like um how they built their rosters for the draft over the years. This is kind of like a cherry on the top kind of picks. And they still picked offensive line. Gotta like that.
Hmm.
I think the Stover pick might be really smart in about 2 to 3 years when like Schultz starts to tail off and it's like, oh, who do we have as a backup? Oh, tight
Hmm.
ends take 2 or 3 years to develop. Just plug and play this guy over here.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
gives them a chance to develop in the offense, build rapport with CJ Stroud um, in situations, and then become a focal guy later. Not that focal guys needed on the
Hmm.
Texans, but love that part from the draft. There wasn't too much things like that stood out. Probably they're double dipping in the cornerback with Lassiter as their first pick really stands out to me because it's like they realize cornerback's a problem and they're gonna attack it relentlessly. But other than that, I thought that was an okay draft. A lot of these picks, you'll have to wait and see how they do.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and then it's all just because like the roster is just so loaded with star talent that a lot of these rookies don't just they're good, but or at least a couple of them are good from what we know. But it just there's no spot for them to at least play for now, and so uh, yeah, it'll be interesting to look back on this class like 3 years from now when kind of they're nearing the ends of their rookie contracts, but. It's kind of this is a big wait and see kind of class for this team.
Yeah, not many changes on the coaching staff side. Um, I how they're able to retain Bobby Slowick after his wonderful season is like beyond me. But the fact they were able to run back the set of coaching staffs is really nice. Um, I think they're only going to go up from here based on the moves they made last season. Did you have
Mhm.
any comments to make on the coaches?
Oh no, I don't.
Okay, sweet. So, in case you need a short summary on the Texans, Super Bowl contenders, period. End of
Hmm.
statement. That's it. That's all we
Yeah.
got to say about them. One team that
Oh
we
wait, wait,
thought
wait. Who's your MVP of the team? and your second year break.
Yeah. How could we forget that? Okay, X Factor. I gotta say, it's gotta be Danielle Hunter
Hmm.
because obviously you're gonna key in on Will Anderson Jr. He's the guy that makes the engine run. He's really gonna be looked at because essentially him and Grenard swap places,
Hmm.
and his impact is gonna go a long way to see how high can this defense match his offense. So he's my X factor, and then usually we do the second year players, right?
Yeah.
Um, for me, it's this is gonna be tough because I had a really good season last year, but I'm gonna say Tank Dell.
Hmm.
I was high on Xavier Hutchinson last year. Like Tank Dell was like a guy where it's like I could see him struggle against press coverage a little bit, but like he absolutely blew it out of the water. He's the guy that probably is the best number 3 in the league right now. I could see him take a second year leap, easily hit 1,200 yards. But if that's Nico, that's Nico. That's Stephon Diggs, that's Stephon Diggs. But I think the presence of both of those receivers I just mentioned are going to help Dell get the run after catch opportunities that he
Hmm.
excels at and uses explosiveness.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd say for my MVP or my X factor, uh, I'm gonna have Joe Mixon. Um, I think, I mean, a big part for this offense, I think, is like him continuing to be the Joe Mixon that we know. I feel like the last like 3-4 years, people have been saying, "Oh, this is the year Joe Mixon falls off," but he really hasn't fallen off too much. And
He's had a
so,
great year last year too.
so he's continued to produce, and so if he's just kind of steady like that, and kind of has a better year than what Singletary did last season, I think that'll just be really good for the offense in general. Obviously, you can run a stronger play action game, and then teams can't just throw out like nickel and dime packages all game just because they got to watch out for Joe Mixon. And just the fact that Joe Mixon's name, I feel like, has a bit more of a kick to it than Devin Singletary has, just looking at their career accolades. Um, teams are more likely to key into Joe Mixon, which will result in, I think, more openings for those receivers. And then,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you're just talking about from like how the defense like structures itself to handle their offense.
Hmm.
Like where we have Singletary as a running back and like Mixon as a running back. Just because of like the amount of production Mixon has had. Not necessarily like Singletary needed a breaking out party for people to be like, oh, we gotta structure ourselves differently.
Hmm.
With Mixon, you kind of know what you're getting. He's a threat both run and pass. So it's like
Hmm.
you're not let off the hook either way. So
Hmm. Yeah.
that is completely fair.
And then for my second year, I also was going to choose Tank Dell. Obviously, he had a really strong start. He got hurt like midway through the season, which is super, super unlucky for him. But I think if he can just build upon what he was doing last season, I think that um, this offense can truly be just unguardable and unstoppable. Just because it's like you already have to put effort towards stopping Stephon Diggs, and then if Tank Dell emerges like a borderline top 10, top 15 wide receiver next season, like there's nothing teams could really realistically do to stop this offense.
Except drop 8 and then
Hmm.
a mix and run amok. So it's literally you're playing that cat and mouse kind of game. So yeah, I mean, okay, now I'll end it. Texans are Super Bowl contenders. Period. End of statement. Let's move on. I mean, what else can you say?
Hmm.
But all right, this team they started out 8-3, eight
Hmm.
and three in those first 11 games. If you told me they would not have a double-digit season at the end of the year, I would have called you crazy. And they ended the season 9-6, tied with the Colts, who didn't even have their starting quarterback. It was a weird year for the Jacksonville Jaguars. What's his view on this season and projecting what they look like based on their schedule and what they have going on?
Hmm. Yeah. Honestly, like low key, I'm worried about him still. There's like nothing that they've necessarily done over the course of the off season or anything that's made me like worry for this team, but I feel like every year we see some like news articles for like sports articles that pop up that are like, oh, like, well, who are going to be this year's breakout players? And then I feel like literally the last couple of years, Trevor Lawrence has been number one on that list, and I'm like, how much more time are we going to give him to like break out before the Jaguars feel like they got to move in another direction? And
I mean,
so,
not within next year. I don't think so, based on the
uh,
bag they gave him. So,
well, yeah,
and
but
like we'll see.
yeah, because I'm just thinking like, let's say the next like like, I mean, if he just never performs to the expectations, it's like, sure, you give him like a nice contract or whatever, but like we're looking at Daniel Jones with another really big contract, and everybody's talking about moving on from him. The Broncos moved on from Russell Wilson pretty early in the contract, and so it's like, how much suck can you experience from a quarterback before you're ready to move on, and despite the contracts?
I mean, that's a fair point. From a win-loss perspective, what do you got as floor and ceilings for them?
Floor, I mean, I still say maybe like an 8-win floor, maybe a 9-win floor. Like they're still a good team. They have good players on both offense and defense. I still think Trevor Lawrence is not like, maybe he's around middle of the pack in terms of quarterback play in the league. Which is serviceable. He's like serviceable enough to have this team like competitive towards the playoff race. I mean, they started 8-3 for a reason, anyways. Um, so like,
Your boy here last year on the same podcast had them going for 14 wins.
yeah, well, because last season we're like, oh, like, well, because 2 seasons ago Trevor Lawrence finished on fire to end the season, and so everybody's like, oh, Trevor Lawrence is going to keep doing his thing. And then all of a sudden, and then we start the season, I guess he is kind of doing his thing. But then at the end of the season, all of a sudden, like, he just loses the mojo, I guess, and fades out of playoff contention, which sucks. I mean, if he can get back to where he was, I still think that, like, if, Trevor Lawrence develops to the expectations or even, like, half the expectations I think people had of him, this could be like a 13-win team, but
I don't know
like,
about that. That's kind of a stretch. Like half the expectations. I don't know. I think in a crowded AFC conference, and especially looking at their schedule, dude, I have their floor and ceiling being like 7 to 10 wins.
mm-hmm.
Not because of anything the way they ended last year. It's because of who's on their docket
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that Indianapolis will be a lot better, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Houston's already arrived. I don't think Houston will have as much of a ramp up period as they did last year.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to deal with Miami. Buffalo's still a good team. Cleveland's probably going to be better. Philadelphia, better coaches. Green Bay was arrived.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hopeful Chicago's there, but they're not a tough out. And then you got Detroit, who's in the NFC Championship game. Then after the bye, you got Houston, you got the Jets, then you got Indianapolis. I mean, it'll be hard. I'll be hard pressed to see them win more than 10 games this year, which is crazy. They could look like a better team than they did last year, but their win-loss record might not be that much different.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so that's why I was saying, like, my ceiling with them is like a breakout season Trevor Lawrence kind of thing. I think realistically, your like prediction sounds a bit more accurate for this Jaguars team.
It's a safe prediction for sure.
Because I'm like, with a breakout, like with the expectations with him, he was the generational prospect. You're expecting near Mahomes level of play. Mahomes is insane, so obviously I don't think anybody is that level. But that's kind of what you expected, that generational, unstoppable force. And if he happens to get things to click and becomes this year's breakout guy like he's supposed to every year, I can see them beating those predictions. I think we have of like maybe a 10-win ceiling, but realistically, I don't see the breakout. Maybe this is me jinxing it, so now he does have the breakout. I don't know, but I mean, I hope he breaks out. If not, I guess they got Mac Jones now. With this amazing backup quarterback carousel. But
yeah, I mean, low key though, it's screaming Tannehill to me, and like all the positive things. So like, I think that's a great move to have for the Jaguars. So I'm not gonna boast on that. Free agency speaking, they made a significant amount of moves, in my opinion. They obviously re-signed Cleveland, who they traded for last year, as with Cleveland, the guard.
Mm-hmm.
Them bringing in Armstead, I think, was huge. Like, we'll talk about their coaching changes as well. I think that's going to be significant. I think their defense is going to be a lot more consistent. And then bringing in Mitch Morse from Buffalo, I think that's going to be very helpful for Trevor Lawrence getting added protection. That was much needed. Those are three free agency moves that stood out to me.
Yeah, they didn't have Texans level move of free agency, but I think they added a lot of nice pieces, kind of on all aspects of the team. All aspects of the team. When you got Gabe Davis, Devin Duvernay, the receivers, you signed an offensive lineman, you get a defensive lineman, you get a couple guys in the secondary. They covered a lot of bases in free agency, what I liked. And the guys that they brought in too were some of the guys that I think a lot of fans around the league wished their team may have made moves for. I think I like the Gabe Davis signing, where you get Gabe Davis on one side, Brian Thomas is likely going to play the other side with Christian Kirk in the slot, and it kind of you get a nice deep Gabe Davis is mostly a one-trick player, but it's a nice deep threat that Trevor Lawrence has an option to throw it deep and maybe have a good connection with. I think Calvin Ridley was supposed to be that guy last season, and they didn't quite have the right connection. Ridley would make a crazy play here and there, but I feel from a consistency basis, he wasn't that great at being a super deep threat. But then you got Gabe Davis, who I think may just fill that kind of specific role for this team kind of nice.
Yeah, I remember coming on this pod and saying, don't be surprised if Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley are trading wide receiver 1 type numbers game by game because of the way they structure their offense. It favors Christian Kirk a lot. He's the one there, and in my opinion, and I don't really think defenses know what to do because they were trying to key in on Calvin, and Calvin still had some blow up games, but I think it was more the GM didn't really know what to do from the wide receiver standpoint. And I think he was trying to re-sign Calvin, and it wasn't really in his plans to let him go after the contract he gave him following his suspension. And then once he signed with Tennessee, he's just oh wait, I gotta make all these moves to cover my bases here. I actually Jacksonville's the one weird spot with wide receivers because you remember the contract they doled out to Kirk at the time. It just reset the entire wide receiver market. And it's just oh, what the heck? Why would you give Christian Kirk that much money? And they were proven right by the move. And I think Gabe Davis is a similar type of move that I like for different reasons.
Yeah.
If you look at how their offense is structured, it's nice. It's nice because you got their one with Christian Kirk. Parker Washington had a full season under his belt. I expect some improvement there. He's my second-year breakout player. And then I really like the Brian Thomas signing. He has the potential to be a future wide receiver number 1. I don't think Gabe Davis is going to be relied as much as people think based on the money he's getting. It's a good situation for him. Doug Peterson's a good schematic offensive coordinator. So I actually like the area move a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of the draft, I obviously gave my opinions on what I thought Brian Thomas Jr. did. Were there any other draft picks you liked out of here?
Yeah, it was mostly the Brian Thomas Jr. pick that I really liked. I know there's a lot of people are either really high on him or really low on him. But everybody kind of regarded him still as a first, second round kind of talent. I like, that they got him at 23. I think, I'm pretty high on him. I understand the issues that he has from a receiving standpoint. But then just looking at the team, it's he doesn't necessarily need to be an unstoppable wide receiver 1 right now, and he has room to get better as a receiver, which I like. And then I'm not too familiar with the other players that they drafted. You got Mason Smith, a defensive interior defensive lineman kind of guy who has like a potential to move up over Roy Robert Harrison and like, but overall, I mean, I'm like similarly to the Texans, there's a lot of depth moves in this draft class for him, and so I feel like this is another group of guys that will be like maybe 3 years from now, it'll be a nice time to review and say, was this a good draft for the Jaguars? Is it just going to be Brian Thomas was good and then the rest of the draft was a bust for them? Like, only time can really tell for this team.
Yeah, no, that's 100% fair. I'm gonna hold you to that. 3 years from now, I'm gonna timestamp this moment, and we're gonna replay it, and then we're gonna give our thoughts based on it. But totally kidding, of course. But a lot of their selections, they went heavy on the defensive line. And that was the problem for them, and I think they just tried to get more bodies in there. If you look at the way their front seven is structured with like Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, you want to try and free them up when they do come free. So I think the Armstead signing, the draft picks they put in, it screams to me like they're just trying to get more ancillary help to those pass rushers, so that way they can be dominant pass rushers. So I liked it from that perspective. They're looking at the team holistically in that matter, but nothing really stood out to me. Even the kicker they signed, I'm like, okay, cool. Sign the kicker. Like, now what? So I'm with you on that. As far as coaching changes, anything of significance you wanted to bring up there?
No.
Okay. I think I went through my X factor. Who is your X factor for the Jaguars?
My X factor, I feel like I gotta give it to Trevor Lawrence just because, like, my whole kind of rant that I had at the beginning of this team's thing, where I'm talking about how Trevor Lawrence really just needs to figure it out. Like I understand it takes time. Like, the quarterback is a tough position to learn and be good at in the NFL, but when you're considered generational prospect and every year you're listed as this year's number one breakout candidate, like, eventually you just gotta you gotta ball out, man. But then for my second year breakout, I did like Parker Washington. I'll go with somebody else though. I'll pick Tank Bigsby.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, like, obviously Travis Etienne's the guy, but last preseason I remember there was all like the buzz about Tank, and I was pretty excited for him, and he sucked pretty bad last season. Like, on his touches, he really wasn't getting. He really wasn't doing too much with it, and I think that hopefully with like a season under his belt, he kind of figures things out a little bit more, and we get to see more of that preseason superstar during the course of the regular season. But yeah, that's kind of just a guy I hope takes that second year leap, I guess.
I realized I gave my second year player, not my X factor. My bad. But my X factor here, it's got to go Armstead on the defensive side. Defense had a lot of issues. I have to look at Armstead and see how much can he transform like the pass rush around him, because if he starts to get going, now I have like a 3 pass rush monster you have to worry about. And great against the run, that's always good. From a coaching standpoint, not much has changed, but I think Ryan Nielsen is going to be really, really consistent, and this defense is actually going to improve under him, because if you watched Atlanta last season, that offense was a show. Let's just call it that. It was a show for bad reasons. And that defense was actually really, really good. The scheme was good. The players in it were good. And Jeff Okudah coming from Atlanta, I think, is a sign that it's kind of like a stamp of approval for, like, hey, this is a coaching staff that can maximize me at least. I think Nielsen's a guy that can maximize his players. He's got a lot of good pass rushers on the Jaguars as well, probably with more untapped talent over there. So he's the coach to monitor. I'm pretty confident he'll do a good job there. Alrighty. I'm guessing you don't have anything on that, so we'll jump to the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, the Colts honestly were surprisingly really good last season. Um, I mean, like looking back, you can kind of see the pieces that were there that led to things going so well. I think the one surprise last season was how well Zach Moss played. Um,
100%.
like, like I think no, like who would have thought that of all like the breakouts that happened last season, Zach Moss of all people, like he was on the Bills and he was kind of just like he had his moments here and there. He wasn't really doing much, and then all of a sudden like
He's
he
kind of like
just
an AJ Dillon, like a poor man's AJ Dillon, basically.
and then with like Jonathan Taylor's absence, he's like unbelievable. And so now he's like in a starting role with like the Bengals, right? Like
Yep.
so like it was just an insane year from Zach Moss, and I think he was a big part of the success that this team had last season, where like injuries kind of riddled this team. He was able to kind of be that steady on the offense that kind of helped, the struggles amongst other things kind of balance out a bit more.
Yeah, and I'm looking at fantasy drafts right now. Everybody's on the Anthony Richardson hype train.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of hoping he would be like quarterback 10 or like 12, and I can get a bargain this year, but that's probably not going to happen. I think people saw the rushing touchdowns, and the short fan is like, let's shot that out to a year. I was like, dang it, I wanted Anthony Richardson at quarterback 10 and round 10 or 11. That's probably not going to happen this year. But I'm gonna say 9 wins is their floor this year. I think we saw their floor last season,
Mm-hmm.
and if that's their floor, that's like they could win the division from the Texans. They really could. I think their roster top to bottom is like on par as far as like when you consider how the coaching staff elevates everybody around them. I think they're neck and neck with the Texans. They'll be right there. I have them projected to be slightly under the Texans. So that's why I keep the floor at 9.
Mm-hmm.
But I think their ceiling is 12.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's risky to say, but I think their ceiling's 12 or 13 there. Like it's it's kind of widespread in like how you view a 9-8 team versus like a 12-5 team. But I think Indianapolis is going to be around there.
Yeah, and like I feel like that's a pretty good floor to have. I think maybe like 8 win floor for me, which is even though it's technically worse than what they did last season, I do think that there's a couple of games or just like a stretch for these Colts that I think was like a surprisingly better than maybe they should have done like moments. I think like as a Broncos fan, I watch all the Broncos games or can at least keep track of all the Broncos games, and there's like that 5-game streak where the Broncos just had like winning games that they shouldn't, and I think they were playing better than they really were at the time. So I think all things considered, the Broncos should have had a worse record because it was like just a ridiculous defensive run that they had. I think Colts, well, not to that crazy of an extent. I think maybe they like at worst they're down 1 from last season, but I do agree that like I could see them winning 12, maybe 13 wins if everything lines up for them too.
Yeah, I mean they didn't do much in free agency at all. Going back to their schedule real quick, like their schedule was really nice because they finished 3rd in the division, technically. They only have to worry about Houston, Jacksonville, Miami, and then maybe Buffalo and New York, and yeah, obviously Detroit. But that's it. That's it. That's like 5 or 6 teams you have to worry about. That's 5 or 6 games that are like, oh, we got to worry about it. So it's like, I think it's very realistic to put them in a double-digit win season. Like, but right out the gate, they're facing Houston week 1 in Indy. I kind of wish I was within driving distance to see that because tickets right now are $62, and I'm like, that is cheap. That is cheap from what I think of the Colts. When I think about the Texans, like that's going to be if you're in the Indy area, I would get that. I would get those tickets right now. That's a bargain. because I think that's going to be a shootout,
Mm-hmm.
like where it's going to be like a 34-31 type of game. Great energy. Like that's go and get that deal. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, free agency they didn't really do much. I think the Joe Flacco signing was very interesting. I would have tried to kept like Minshew, but I understand it. He had a good year last year. Um, they're still holding on to Sam Ellinger and Keaton Slovis. They recently got him, so it's
Mm-hmm.
like I think they see some things down the depth chart there. But um, yeah, that was pretty much the notable free agency signing I paid attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, yeah, it was a pretty underwhelming free agency, like you said. Uh, like just before when I was like making this list of players, I was asking Josh, I'm like, who did they add? Like
They did
they
add
give
Raekwon
him
Davis, so
nothing.
like that's like a notable need ad they had there. But
Mm-hmm.
other than that, that was it. This is the type of team where they'll grow their players like hometown and
Mm-hmm.
like want to re-sign those guys. So a lot of re-signings here. Like Kenny Moore got re-signed, like a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of guys here.
Yeah, I think they did like 8 or 9 re-signings, and so it's like, I mean, you like the talent that you have, so you keep it, and obviously you know how they fit in your scheme too. Versus there's like times where like a pretty good player signs like and doesn't do well. Like I'm thinking of what's that dude? He was the Patriots corner that was good a couple of years ago, like Josh something, right? And
Uh,
he signed
Not
with the
Josh Gordon.
no, the
What's
cornerback
his
he signed with the Chargers, and I think he's
Oh,
back.
J.C. Jackson. J.C.
Yeah,
Jackson.
J.C.
That's what
Jackson,
you're
that's what
thinking
it
of.
was. Where it's like you bring in a good guy like J.C. Jackson, just doesn't fit with the scheme. So then I think he's back with the Patriots. I think not 100%
Yeah,
sure,
they
but
gave a lot. They gave a massive 5-year deal to that kid.
hmm and so like if your guys are working in your system, sign him. Even though there might be better prospect technically in free agency, and so that's what I like from this team.
Yeah, yeah, and they want to manage the cap well. I mean, they were kind of in a window where they can afford to like throw out as much money as they can, and
Hmm
like their roster's decent. It's nice. It's really good. Like it's really good for a 9-win team there.
Yeah.
Um, and their draft, like building for the draft, they're making good selections. Like Latu, like I wasn't really
hmm
a fan of him as like talent wise compared to edge rushers, but like he is a great fit on this roster. If you think about like they already invested in Quiddy Pay
hmm
and Odenigbo, but they have to play consistently well. And then you
hmm
already have Buckner. Like this is a guy that can afford to be a one-trick pony. One of
hmm
the fastest guys, one of the best athletes from the pass rushers. So like that was a good signing. I really
hmm
liked Adonai Mitchell. This is a good landing spot for him. Like Colts, as much as I rave about the Texans, like top 3 receivers, Colts got a strong argument here for like a nice, well-rounded, like top to bottom 3. And now Alec Pierce is your 4. I did
hmm
not see that coming at all. Like Alec Pierce is a good like 2 or 3, but like he's all the way fourth on the depth chart. So like they're building something there.
hmm
So I really like those top 2 selections from the Colts.
hmm Yeah, I was a pretty big fan of their top two. Because I know there was like we were wondering if like the Falcons at 8 would have picked one of the edge rushers potentially being Laiatu Latu. So I think him falling to the Colts at 15 was a pretty
Wait,
nice
why
steal.
why didn't the Falcons select one of those pass rushers? Where'd they go?
Quarterback, your boy.
We'll talk all about that next week for sure. But yeah, I think we had them mocked Dallas Turner, right?
Yeah, it was
At
like
8.
Dallas Turner. Yeah.
And first 14 picks, all offense, right? So like
hmm
if you're the Colts, you already have your quarterback, you already have like good players on your
hmm
offense. Like you got French, you got Fries. Like
hmm
that's all you need. I love if you guys haven't seen that picture of like Wesley French and Will Fry standing next to each other with their jerseys like backwards, and it's literally reading French fries. That's the best combination of teammates like standing together like you'll ever see.
uh-huh.
I just laugh out loud every time I see it. So um, yeah, um, yeah, you have that. From the offensive line is pretty good. Like you still have Quentin Nelson kicking it. Um,
hmm
So like really, you're just taking the best player available to them. That's Latu Latu. So like I
Hmm.
like their approach. A little bit of copycat from the Ravens, but like I mean that's a great strategy. So nice job.
Yeah.
Okay. Looking at their coaching staff, I don't recall seeing any major changes. Um, still have Gus Bradley and Jim Bob Cooter in their coordinator spots, and like Shane Steichen as head coach. Um, Shane's like if you look at the spots he's been around, started with Justin Herbert, and then he got hired because of what he did with Jalen Hurts. Like this is the best possible situation for Anthony Richardson, man. So it's like I'm looking at this team and I'm like, they're on their way up. They're going to be better than they were last year, and they
Hmm.
didn't do much. They didn't do much. They just made tiny changes here and continued to sign their guys. It's the best possible environment. I think the Colts are going to break the cycle here.
Hmm.
Um, like it's been rough. It's been rough between like how to handle Andrew Luck's retirement, but I think they finally reached a point where they found their guy.
Hmm.
As you know, I've been really high on Richardson since he's been
Hmm.
drafted. This is gonna be if he has an MVP type season, I wouldn't be shocked. I
Hmm.
would not be shocked. He probably saw CJ Stroud won Rookie of the Year, and he's like, I got a chip on my shoulder now.
Hmm.
So dark horse candidate. If you had to bet on anybody to win MVP, why not Anthony Richardson? He's
Hmm.
my X factor for this season. And then
Hmm.
while I'm at it, second year player that I'm really excited to see. Um, you're gonna hate me for saying this because I know he's your guy. He's been your guy. Josh Downs. He's my second year breakout. I think he's gonna emerge as like an excellent complement to Michael Pittman Jr. And he might have 1,100 yards next season.
Hmm.
I'm like he's a guy that I think is getting like I would draft him in fantasy. I think he's
Hmm.
getting criminally underrated in fantasy right
Hmm. Yeah. I think those are both pretty solid selections you got there. um, yeah, I mean, I feel like my two guys are probably the same as yours too. Like Anthony Richardson, he was taken really high. So obviously, for this team to move forward in terms of how good they are, Anthony Richardson needs to be good. Um, and so, like, hopefully, even though he was hurt, um, he just gets better at reading. And he was like, this time in all this rehab or whatever that he's been doing, to get better from his injury. Hopefully, he's been, still studying tape, kind of just figuring out how to acclimate to the NFL. Even though he's been sidelined pretty much the entirety of it. Because I like even with the games that he played last season, like his rushing upside is for sure insane. I think there was a little bit to be desired from his passing ability still in terms of just like the output that he'd had. Um, but I can envision, scenarios where he does play pretty well this season. And then obviously I'm a big fan of Josh Downs. I think uh, there's a really good supporting cast around Anthony Richardson right now, which, um, and Anthony Richardson seems like a great guy. Like I see clips of him on like Instagram, and he's always doing something really nice. And I'm like,
Great football analysis there, of course. Yeah, great football analysis there.
yeah, but so I'm rooting for his success. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you guys have been watching this regularly, and that's gonna be very rare to find. But Corstian and I have been beefing on like how well Anthony Richardson will do in the NFL. Like
Hmm.
I think he's like the greatest prospect ever, pretty much. And Corstian thinks I'm stupid. Will Levis is 10 times better. Um, that's
Oh
that's a dumbed
yeah.
down version right there. But without the nuance, that's like the dumbed down version right there. But all I gotta say is from last season, watch him throw a ball where he's about to get absolutely wrecked by Aaron Donald. If it was Geno Smith throwing that ball, he sees Aaron Donald, he's like, oh shoot. I just gotta survive. And you were just like, I got this, man. I got this. And just casually completes a pass on the opposite hash like 30 yards out. It's kind of ridiculous. It's kind of ridiculous how talented this guy is. Am I crazy in saying his ceiling's higher than Lamar Jackson? That's a hot take right there. I think it's a strong argument, but well, I'll jump off my soapbox now. We'll jump into another team with the other quarterback that Corstian really loves. It's the Tennessee Titans. They finished 4 wins fewer than the Texans, but like in the bottom of the AFC South. This is the biggest wild card to me in the division and in the AFC because they built a win now roster, and I've not been a fan of like Will Levis's talent personally, but people have been wrong before. People have been wrong about Justin Herbert. People have been wrong about Dak when he first like stepped into the league. I was wrong about Jordan Love. Like things change. Things change. So this is like a complete. We don't know what to expect out of this team. What do you make of the Tennessee Titans?
Yeah, they like you said, they are in a weird spot where they have like a mix of some veterans that make it feel like, oh, they're trying to win it all now, but then they have a lot of pieces that I still have question marks about that I'm like, well, it might be a couple years before they're like truly competitive. And so it's tricky. Like Will Levis, he's had good games, he's had bad games. Mason Rudolph's there, I guess. You know.
Hey, don't go hating on Mason Rudolph too much. He kind of did this thing in Pittsburgh a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not good enough to make them think that they could start him this season though. But
I mean, when you got Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, that's like a different story. But yeah, fair point. They did get like Russell Wilson for like $2 million because of you know whose team like did a bad job of managing that.
Yeah. And then overall, there's like a lot. Oh, I guess we didn't do. Oh, never mind. I was thinking something else.
I got him flustered over here, guys. just had to bring the Broncos up, and that's all you got to do to rattle Corstian, you know.
Oh no, I just remember that I wanted to hype up Jelani Woods, but that was it. From the Colts because I don't know. Anyways,
secondary breakout. There you go.
Yeah, Jelani Woods. Woo, I hope you do good. But with the Titans here, yeah, I'd like they have a lot of cool pieces that I think can be really dangerous in the league. Like just looking at the receiving room, right? Like you look at that group and you're like, it could potentially be really scary to go against the Titans offense. If you got DeAndre Hopkins, who does as DeAndre Hopkins does, Calvin Ridley, who I think he has more of a bounce back here, I guess, in terms of he has one full season back in the NFL to reacclimate, and then this season he could potentially be a little bit more consistent. Tyler Boyd's a guy that I've been liking for a while. And he always, for some reason, finds himself as the number 3 on teams, even though he's pretty solid. And then you got Treylon Burks, who I still like. Obviously, he hasn't panned out as much as I think a lot of Titans fans hoped. But I think he's a solid 4.
Wait, you mean he's not the next AJ Brown?
Unfortunately not. As much as the coaching staff hoped that you would just be in.
Dude, if you look at these receivers on like all 4 teams, it's kind of crazy. Like not so much like the Jaguars aren't so much top heavy, but you're just looking at like Texans, Colts, and like Titans, and it's just like, why are all these like once like top 10, top 15 receivers on these teams? It's like it's insane. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, because I'm even a big fan of Kyle Phillips. Like, I know he is pretty much purely a slot guy, and he was hurt quite a bit, I think, last season, so he didn't really have much opportunity to play. But if he's healthy all season, then you get like another just kind of inside guy in that receiving room that you can kind of put it and have him kind of in specific schemes or different kind of, offensive lineups to give guys rest, which I think is nice. But yeah, like you're saying, the depth on all these teams for receiver, just these receiving rooms in general are pretty crazy.
Yeah. And schedule wise, it's not bad at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this: their first 7 games will be telling because you start out on the road against the Bears, easy dub for the Bears. But just saying, you got the Bears, then you go home to face the Jets, then stay at home, face the Packers, then you're going to Miami, then you're bye, and then you go home to face the Colts, then road trip, Buffalo, Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first 7 games are going to be the barometer for how well the Titans do this season. Because if they magically come out 5-2 or 4-3, then it's oh boy, this division might have 8 wins as last place, given where all these teams are. So it's that to me, it's tough because they're such a wild card. It's tough for me to put a floor and ceiling on this team. But if I had to put one, I'm gonna say 5 wins is their floor, and 10 wins is their ceiling. That was really safe to say. But I'm I don't know. They're the Green Bay Packers of the Green Bay Packers from last season. The Tennessee Titans are the Green Bay Packers of this season. If that makes sense. Because you have no idea what to expect at quarterback. What's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my floor and ceiling is pretty close to yours. I still think getting 10 wins would be pretty tough for this team. So I guess it's valid as a ceiling, but yeah, because I still while I do think Will Levis is all right, I still think there's going to be quite a bit of growing pains from Will Levis. I mean, last season, I think there was one game that he had 300 pass yards, 3 passing touchdowns. I think that might have been his first game, but it was
against the Falcons. It just blitz all the time.
But yeah, so it's there's the potential for some good games like that, but there's also a reason why Titans didn't make the playoffs, and I think it was part of the growing pains of Will Levis. There's also a reason he wasn't taken round 1, and it's because there are the limitations that people saw. There's a certain amount of room to grow that I think people saw from him, and I think he answered some of those questions in terms of what he did last season, but I still think there's a lot of question marks around him. There's a potential that this is his last season starting for the Titans if it goes pretty south, and they just go for quarterback in the next year's draft or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're in prime position to do that if things go south. So that makes sense to me. We're already jumping on an hour, which is crazy, but we'll finish it up, go for the process. Free agency, they made a lot of pretty cool signings. They got Ridley from the Jaguars, they got Pollard from the Cowboys, they got your boy Cushenberry, Mason Rudolph as well, and Kenneth Murray, Awuzie. They got a lot of these solid pieces on their team. What did you make of free agency?
Yeah, I think it was similar to the Jaguars, where they got just a lot of nice impact players that it wasn't overbearing the roster, but it kind of filled kind of a lot of needs that I think this team had, especially when you look at their secondary, where they got Jadobe Awuzie and then they got L'Jarius Sneed. So it's kind of new faces here, and then obviously filling the issue where we saw Sean Murphy-Bunting was all right, but then it was him. Caleb Farley hasn't really panned out as much as I think people were expecting. I remember when he was getting drafted, there's talks about him going mid first round is potentially the top cornerback of his draft. Obviously that wasn't the case, and I guess and the NFL was right in not drafting him in the first round, or maybe it was late first round, but drafting him as high as where I think some people expected him to go. Um, but yeah, and then like you said, I liked a ton of their offensive pieces where I think it just fills enough holes that it gives them room to kind of try out stuff in the future still if they need to.
Yeah, 100%. Jump into their draft picks once I can get them loaded. Yeah, J.C. Latham, offensive tackle. That was a great get for them because
Mm-hmm.
pair him next to Skoronski, who I think is in for a massive season. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be nice because you're going to protect any young quarterback going into there. And then you you add a Sweat to the defense with Tavondre Sweat. He's pretty great defensive tackle,
Mm-hmm.
very defensive focused. They have a couple of receivers in there, but mostly other than that, like at like edge, cornerback, safety, they try their best to like adjust all areas of the defense. Again, very depth focused in this draft so far. What did you make of their draft? Any players that stand out to you?
Yeah, I was a fan of Tavondre Sweat. Um, I know during the draft process, he had like some DUI or something like that, and so there's fear amongst like draft and analysts that he might drop like third or fourth, maybe like fourth or fifth round, just because of like the character concerns or whatnot.
This dude is 366 pounds.
hmm Yeah, but yeah, this guy is insane. I think if he didn't have those like potential issues, he could have been drafted like I mean he was already drafted high second, but like he could have been a back end first round kind of guy, I think. And so I think he's just like a really nice player. I mean, he was a beast at Texas. Um, and so I think like obviously I think JC Latham is going to be good, but I think Sweat could be a a better impact player for this team than JC Latham is.
Yeah. And not to like, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Sweat by saying that. I'm just saying, from football standpoint, playing him next to Jeffrey Simmons, who uses his size well,
Mm-hmm.
that's a great landing spot. It's going to be hard to run on both of them
Mm-hmm.
just because of their size and how much they can control the line of scrimmages when they
Mm-hmm.
play. So that's the angle I was taking off with Sweat. But that's for measurables, that's insane because
Mm-hmm.
good luck trying to block that. That's going to be very, very difficult too. But yeah, I mean, not much to expand on the draft picks. It's going to be again another 3-year window. Most of these draft picks are that way because you gotta see how they develop and how they like
Mm-hmm.
learn in the system before they get their bag and how they handle their
Mm-hmm.
bag and whatnot. From the coaching staff, a lot of changes here. Had a coaching change. I didn't agree with it at the time. I still don't. I think Mike Grable should still be the head coach here, but nevertheless, they go with Brian Callahan as
Mm-hmm.
offensive coach here. Great job as offensive coordinator for the Bengals. Um, got his dad, Bill Callahan, manning the offensive line. So great landing spot for Skoronski and Latham to be the future anchors of this
Mm-hmm.
team. I really like that a lot. Um, I don't know what to expect of Denard Wilson as defensive coordinator. I
Mm-hmm.
have no idea what kind of defense they're going to run. Um, you got a lot of like guys that I'm familiar with based on like relatives, like Steve Donatel. Pretty sure he's related to Ed Donatel somehow. Who was a great defensive assistant for the Chicago Bears. Then you got Chris Harris, who's also a great defensive assistant for the Chicago Bears. But other than that, I don't really know what to expect out of this coaching staff, which is why I view this team as a whole as like a wild card because
Yeah.
they got a lot of good veteran pieces, really great veteran pieces. A young quarterback, um, some important additions and like free agency. But what says you? Do you have any thoughts to add on coaching staff here?
Um, yeah, with Mike Rabel, I think he's still a good coach and he should be a head coach somewhere kind of thing. But I think it might have been the right decision to move on in terms of, I guess, kind of like changing the like wanting to change the identity of the team, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know. Because like I really liked him as the Titans head coach. Um but it feels like some of the I guess the iconic pieces of his run had kind of like either faded out or left, being Ryan Tannehill kind of obviously stopped playing good, and then they lost Derrick Henry in free
He
agency.
really needed a better quarterback. He really did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think with a better quarterback, like if yeah, either Ryan Tannehill was still playing at the level that he needed to be, or just a quarterback that one of the quarterbacks they drafted over the past couple of years in like the not first round, uh, panned out a bit more. I think he would have still been the head coach here, but I think there's just question marks around his like ability to develop quarterbacks. Not necessarily saying it's his job to develop the quarterback, but kind of just like the staff that he had around him were they capable of creating a successful quarterback from just like a rookie. And so I think from that standpoint, there was kind of like a question mark of like, do we move on from him? Because maybe he just can't develop quarterbacks, but he could work well for a team that has a developed quarterback.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting point, Corstian.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what happens in the next stop. Like, I'm curious to see, because I feel like in that situation, under that reasoning, Atlanta would probably want Rabel more than anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a perfect situation to have Kirk Cousins like
Mm-hmm.
manage that team and have Mike Rabel under it. But
Mm-hmm.
what do I know? I'm not in the front office. I'm not experienced enough to make those decisions clearly.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, before we let you go, I have to ask, who's your X factor in like second year breakouts out of this team?
My X factor, I'll go to Andre Hopkins. I feel like people just don't talk about him enough anymore.
Okay.
And like I still feel like he's good. Maybe not as good as he was a couple of years ago. I mean, he's like early 30s now, which is around the fall off point for a handful of wide receivers. But I think in terms of Will Levis's development, at least, I feel like he needs to be good, and just kind of be able to stand out amongst kind of just the other receivers in this on this team. And then for my second year breakout, I'll have Ty Spears.
Oh man. Okay. You get that one. You got that one. You after what I did to you, I have to. I'll concede that. That's fair.
But yeah, I think last season we saw the limitations of Tony Pollard, and so I think while he'll probably still get the majority of the touches, Ty Spears really needs to just have a good season this year to really balance out, I think, this rush attack and kind of just help balance out the offense.
Yeah. While we're at it, Tajay Spears obviously is also my second year breakout player. I do think he will have 1,100 yards on the ground. I'm very high on the skill set. He was probably top 3 on my board or top 2 on my board last year's draft. I really like the player. I like his explosiveness. I think it's a sign of what they thought of Tajay Spears when they were willing to let Derrick Henry go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's going to take over this backfield. I would draft him as a starting running back and treat him as such in fantasy. I'm a believer in the player. I still am holding on to him in Dynasty because of that reason. I think I am. I have to check my Dynasty roster. I haven't looked at it in a while. But secondary breakout, this is a good situation for him, I feel like, because this is the type of team that's going to put up a lot of offensive numbers. And even if they're behind, he's still going to be on the field producing a lot. So I'm confident in that. And my X factor, it has to be Will Levis, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of pieces built around him, new coaching staff built around him to help him develop like this. So really, when you're looking at the Titans this season, it's like, did Will Levis get better, and can he be the franchise quarterback of this team at the end of the year? And the primary person under that focus is Will Levis, so that's my X factor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good choice, I think.
Alrighty, guys. Corstian, we covered the daunting AFC South. Who is your division winner out of this if you had to pick?
Division winner for this division, I still feel like I got to go with the Texans. Um, I just feel like it's like I have the least amount of question marks, I guess, surrounding the Texans team. Which I guess just leads me to believe that but I do think the Colts will be the second place team with a fight for third between the Jaguars and the Titans.
Okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have it going the same way. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's going to be a runaway Houston Texans win the division. And that's hard to say because last year, first and second and third place were all separated by a game. But I think it's going to be a dogfight between the Colts and the Texans all year. And I think the Texans barely squeak out top of the division. I could easily see the Colts being top 5 seed. I could also see them being a division winner. But for me, I feel comfortable saying Texans. I would have the Jaguars third. Third just because we need to see how well their defense plays, and then obviously how did their new wide receivers gel with Trevor Lawrence there. And then obviously for the Titans, I think it'll be a little bit challenging. Based on my opinions of Will Levis's talent, we'll see if it can grow on them. But you could easily have it flip, like you mentioned, like Titans and Jaguars. So, Coolio. Alrighty, guys. Thank you for listening. Next week, we're going to be talking about the Atlanta Falcons and who they picked at number 8 overall. Spoiler alert. Very, very, very controversial. That should be a lot of fun. In the meantime, do what Corstian just pointed to. Follow us on Instagram at amon.a.mission over there. Do it now. And on YouTube, it is Amon a Mission, 3 words. You guys enjoy your 4th of July. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe to us so you'll never miss a vid. We'll get that Instagram updated. I feel like that's a part of my speech every time. It never happens, but we're working on it. Maybe this weekend we'll have a couple neat updates for you guys. But so then, peace out, guys.
Peace.